Hello there. Welcome everyone to the Modern Mystics podcast. My name is Alana Kaivalya and I am thrilled and excited to bring one of my very dearest friends, but also incredible colleagues, Justin Blazejewski, the founder of Vetoga, to the podcast today to talk to us a lot more about working with veterans and active military inside of our yoga classes and our yoga community. So Justin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Alana. I'm excited to be on here.
I'm very excited to have you. We have a lot to talk about today, but the first thing I would love for you to do is tell us a little bit more about who you are and how you came to found Vetoga.
Sure. So I'm Justin Blazejewski. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I started doing yoga in 2008, and the reason I started doing yoga was I had some injuries, physical, that I wasn't able to use my normal coping mechanisms to deal with the stress of being in active duty or active war zones when I was traveling for 10 years. So from 2004 to 2014, I did over 40 trips in Iraq and Afghanistan. And in 2008, in the middle of that, were some of the darkest times of my life. And I physically couldn't get that out. And I found yoga, and it was my saving grace. So my personal journey started there. And I became a yoga teacher later that year. Through the Dharma Mitra yoga school. So I did my 2, 5, and 800 hours with Dharma in that lineage. I also trained a lot in Yoga Nidra with the Amrit method of Yoga Nidra. And then on December 2014, my last trip to the war zone, I promised myself to take a year off, do some therapy, do some healing. And at the end of the year, I wanted to create something to give back with all the gifts I've been given as far as all the yoga trainings and things that I've been looking at and trying to move into the veteran space. And in that year off, I did a lot of meditation, a lot of vision boarding, things like that. But it was very clear early on that year that I was going to create Vetoga. And in May of 2015, I incorporated. I got our 501c3 status as a nonprofit, and it took off faster than I expected. And we did our first teacher training in October of that year. So it went pretty fast.
I mean, I think took off faster than expected means that there was obviously a real need for what it is that you're offering. And there are a lot of people who want to learn yoga as veterans and active military. So talk a little bit more about your teacher training program and the way that you run it and how you bring vets and active military into your space.
Sure. Well, our primary mission is to bring the healing benefits of yoga to our military veterans, law enforcement, emergency responders also. Those guys get left out, and women a lot. Yeah. So we provide free classes. So all of our classes are always free for those populations. And our 200-hour curriculum is based off Hatha Yoga from Dharma Mitra's lineage, about 50 to 60% of that. And then the rest of it was contoured to specifics for veterans and military. And that's from my experience in working with several other organizations. We have a staff of 7 teachers. Most of them are 500 or 800 hour Dharma teachers. We do have subject matter experts in Iyengar, Ayurveda, and post-traumatic stress sensitive yoga that we bring in. So our 200 hours unique, where we do the intensive model, where we've been doing a 10 to 12 day intensive, 150 hours in those 12 days. And I'll tell you the reasoning behind that in a second. And then they have their internship phase, which is about 60 days after to complete to get their full 200 hour with Yoga Alliance. The reason we do follow this intense model right now is because for my own personal growth as a military person, we do this thing called boot camp, right?
Yeah,
right.
Where
it's shock and awe, and it's all in there, and it's whether you like it or not, you're immersed in it. And the transformation is fast, and it's strong, and it's powerful. What I noticed, and I didn't know what this is going to be, but in our first 200 hour, we've done 4 now. I have 105 teachers out of those 200 hour programs, but they're about 20 to 25 people. And the healing that happens in those 10 to 12 days, and the bubble that is created in that intensive is really what the Amrita, the sweetness of what Vetoga is what happens in that training.
Very profound. I can only imagine. And I really like actually that you've considered the format that works best for your audience. I actually, it sounds It sounds off, but I promise that this is, a correlation. So I remember when I first learned about this book called A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles is said to have essentially been channeled or delivered to the person who then wrote it down. And the person who wrote it down was a psychology professor. And so when she started hearing the message, the initial message was, this is a course, take notes, which is perfect for a professor, right? How else is a professor going to listen? This person teaches courses, understands note-taking. That is, exactly why the message was delivered that way. So I feel like with your audience having this background, they're going to hear and understand and receive that message, those teachings more profoundly when it's in a format that they really, know and understand. I think that's a really clever way to do things.
It is, and to piggyback off what you're saying, we're all vessels of our teachings, right? And our lineages that we learn from. And when we turn around and face our demographic we're facing is different than what we receive. Every one of our teachers is different, and they're able to reach somebody that I'll never be able to reach.
Yeah, of course.
And that's, as a teacher, that's all you can hope for, is to get them into that space and take ownership and leadership and find what is special to them. And one example is like a military spouse. So we've had several spouses in each teacher training, and they take it back and go back to their group and share with the other spouses. I am not a military spouse, nor I've never been. And I've seen that group grow steadily, and they've created a community and a subculture through Vetoga also. So
right.
I just wanted to give an example.
They really need their own kind of soul food, right? You have to give the right kind of prescription or the right kind of medicine for whatever each audience needs. I think that's a really good point too, that your spouses are able to talk to other spouses differently. You as a vet can connect and reach vets in a really unique way that someone like me who has never been in the military can. And that's another thing I wanted to chat with you today about, Justin, is, one of the things that I do inside my teacher training is I really emphasize the role of spiritual leadership, that everyone who takes my program, they are more than just yoga teachers. There is a deep need in society today for spiritual leadership, for a person that others can come to for spiritual guidance and wisdom, for community building, someone who can lead that community, someone who can usher that community through challenges, trials, and hardships, lead individuals through challenges, trials, and hardships. Really, it's a big job. It's a big responsibility. And so much of what spiritual leadership entails is this idea of social activism, actually being a part of the community, recognizing the deep needs, and talking about some of the triggers or pressures and help to usher in positive change. So, I want people who listen to this podcast, as well as students in my teacher training, to have the tools they need to be able to connect with and resonate with different audiences, even if it's someone from a different specific background than their own. So what kinds of things could yoga teachers do who want to make sure they create a safe and welcoming space for veterans or active military? What is it that's different about what you might do for your military population than what might occur in just, let's say, quote, a regular yoga class?
Sure. I'll come back to that, answer that directly for the teachers and how do they present themselves to the veterans. So going back to the spiritual leadership, so within our training also is you are a leader and you are going to be a community leader. The thing that veterans are lacking when they come home from military or war, when they get out of the military, is that community, that camaraderie. That's why there's the disconnect between civilians and veterans, right? And
Right.
If you're a civilian teacher or a veteran teacher, there's a different language you speak. And the spiritual aspect is very much woven into Vetoga. And from day one, moment one, they're up there chanting and they're teaching in Sanskrit. Yay. And they're loving it. It blew me away when I first saw our friend Brittany up there. I let her loose. I gave them my spiel in the beginning, and we did our morning sadhana, and she made them chant on the first day, and I'm like, what's going to happen? How are they going to react? And I saw tears. I felt energy, and my vision was coming into, because that was what healed me, was that kirtan, especially when I found you. Our first interaction was my first interaction to kirtan that opened and ripped open my heart.
Yeah,
and
it's
expose
powerful.
that. And a quick segue, and a lot of the veteran organizations that are run by civilians and or psychologists, they say, don't say this, don't do that, use English only, don't say Sanskrit, don't say anything spiritual. And I really had to be a pioneer and stand up and say, no, you're operating out of fear.
Yeah.
And when you have fear, veterans smell that and they turn around, right?
Right.
And I've also had dozens of civilian teachers. How I want to help. How do I talk to veterans? How do I work with veterans? I said, well, you've never been through what they've been through. Accept that. That's fine. It is what it is. It's a fact. But in your heart, set an intention. Make sure it's from a pure space. There's no
Yeah.
ego involved. Why are you trying to help? And if it is pure, if you lead from that space and teach however you want to teach, I guarantee they'll be receptive. If there's any fear or hesitation or programming from what to do and what not to do in some of these yoga for PTSD trainings or yoga for veterans trainings that are out there, you will get a disconnect. There will be subconscious walls that are up that you can't take down. So you have to lead from the heart, is what I tell my teachers that are not from a military veteran background.
Absolutely. I feel that deeply with what you're saying. There are always two options for us as human beings. Option one is fear. Option two is love. And I'll let all of you guess which option I generally prefer and recommend as a teacher, and also try to lean into as a human being. When we come from love, we can move mountains and do great things. If we are coming from a place of fear, it will breed more fear. But also what I think that I'm hearing from what you're saying is, when we make assumptions about groups of people, we keep them small. When we set up our own belief system that certain people are only capable of so much, we keep them small. When we have these, not just boundaries, because boundaries are helpful, but barriers to what someone is capable of achieving or doing, we keep them small. And there is no place in yoga for smallness. Everyone is capable and capable of achieving greatness. Everyone is. And we as teachers have to see that. We always have to see that in people. And I think, that is, it's true for any population. It's true for any student. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, again, because you're the expert here, but I think that one of the things that my impression of being in the military or part of the military is that it's very physical and very programmatic, right? Mm-hmm. And that physicality and that programmatic, like that lends itself to being incredibly organized, and they're very capable. They can do many things. I think the thing that is missing that they would seek from someone like you, or perhaps anyone else listening, is the heart, is the spirit. And if they can bring their incredible sense of duty, leadership, responsibility to this heart and meld these things, like unbelievable things can happen. That's just, my opinion of it.
You're absolutely correct. And I'll share on that, another quick story. When I first started teaching and learning how to teach, I'd be over in a war zone for 2 to 3 months, right? And I'd be out at these forward operating bases in the middle of nowhere, a lot of special operations dudes, 6'5", 250 pounds, tatted from head to toe. And they'd see me doing my, quote, yoga stuff, right? And we'd have an explosion the night before, or a firefight, people attacking us. And then the next day I remember one time in the mountains of Afghanistan, and it's 2-3 feet of snow on the ground. I went up on the roof and sat in the snow and meditated for like an hour. Wow. And came down, and I was processing what just happened. So there wasn't any traumas that were sticking, right? From my own personal practice, it was new to me. I was learning, but I came down and they're like, whatever you're doing, show us. And they were at pure vulnerable states that nobody in this world has ever seen those men in before. And I was quickly realized I had an obligation and a responsibility to this, because nobody had access to them surrendering. When you come home from war or the military, you have a subconscious wall. No matter, even if you want somebody to help you in your conscious mind, that subconscious, that person hasn't been through what I've been through. They don't know. They don't care. right? And the way you dissolve those walls is with the heart, with the love, right? With the spiritual side. And we talked about that before. I lived and breathed my spiritual practice, and I emanate it, and I share it through our teacher training, right? And we make sure that the students and the teachers also find their own path and they feel those walls come down, right? And
What
it's
do you
through,
think?
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I mean, of course, I think that on a practical level, to get through um, what the military puts you through, you know, not only are you trained to, but it can often be a safer coping mechanism to put those walls up, to shut down, to brave
Sure.
yourself through it, you know? And I completely understand that from a safety perspective, like you might just have to do that to get through some of the situations that you find yourself in. But that's not human, you know, that's not a long-term sustainable way of being. What do you think are the ways that you've found that are most effective and helpful for your vets and active military to be able to shed those walls, to be
Sure.
able to kind of, you know, break through that training a bit and re-access their humanity?
Yeah. As Dharma says, like these walls, these blockages, it's just the mind, right? It's the layers of the mind that are surrounding that Atma and that soul, right? Um, and with these veterans, live, eat, and breathe, right? With our training to help dissolve, but they have to find it on their own, but through education, like showing those koshas, showing the brain waves, showing when they're going into yoga nidra, when their subconscious is exposed, when their conscious mind is turned off, and when those some scars are able to unravel and to be released. And when I say some scars, we say these memories, these traumas, these quote PTSD things that people say, right?
Yeah, the patterns.
And that's the other thing, right? So when I first started, there was yoga for PTSD. And I'm like, when you identify somebody with PTSD, you are limiting them. You're making them small, like you said. And in the military, unfortunately, to get your medical benefits, you have to go through the medical process. That in
Right.
itself is traumatizing. They don't want to go to another doctor telling them they have PTSD. They want to go somewhere where they feel open and loved so they can start to let those walls fall down. So what I've learned in my practice that we've developed is I took away the D, right away. I said post-traumatic stress. Take away the disorder. There's nothing fucking wrong with you right now.
Yeah.
You're right. And then I started looking at, doing the studies and taking every training I could, studying Vessel Vanderhoff and all these other trauma sensitive out there. And I changed the term to trauma sensitive yoga, right? And then from a policy level change, Congressman Tim Ryan has a bill in called Post-Traumatic Growth Bill for veterans. And that'll allow funding for non-clinical trainings and programs like yoga and not traditional medicine and pills to treat veterans. And there's going to be millions and millions of dollars available. So myself and several other organizations at that level have aligned with this language of post-traumatic growth, right? When you have a traumatic event in the military or anywhere, doesn't matter. That's the other thing. At the root, it's all the same. If you have a rape trauma from your childhood, or you got an explosion and saw your buddy blown up, at the root, those some scars are the same. And when you access them down there, they can be unraveled the same, right? It's a moral injury. It's a scar. We all have physical injuries. We have scars. We heal. It's part of us, right? I have scars. Cool. Okay, move on. You are no longer living in that space. You're living in the future tense, and you're growing and you're healing, and you don't identify with that trauma. And real quick, one thing like Amrit says, like accept what is as is, right? Like when you do unravel these some scars and these releases happen, when those subconscious blocks come down, that traumatic event that you used to wake up and have nightmares about and wake up in a physical reaction state, sweating,
Yeah.
you now think about it and you see it like it's on a movie screen and you are just watching a movie. You have no physical or emotional.
Yeah, you're de-emotionalizing it. You're pulling the emotion out of it. It's the emotion that gets us in. It's the emotional piece that makes us relive that trauma over and over and over. You know, one of the things that one of the terms I love is like your body can only express the truth that you carry inside. You know, so as long as these traumas continue to live inside you, and they do, and as long as they have this emotional triggering that continuously pulls you back into reliving it, healing and moving past it is very, very difficult. Your mind doesn't know the difference between a real and an imagined event. So as you go through this event over and over in your mind, your body is literally reliving it. And to process through those, to move through our traumas, to help to de-emotionalize them, is the work of yoga. It's the work, sometimes it's psychology, and it's deeply profound transformational healing work. One of the things that this work requires is safety. For any person to do this work, they have to feel completely safe. So what are some ways that you create safe spaces so that people can do this kind of work with you?
Sure. So we'll start with the classes, actually, right? So we advertise them as we have what we call an 80-20 rule. It's 80% military veterans or family members, and then 20% civilians, right, in our trainings. And part of that reason is to bring people together. In our community classes, it's free for military veterans and family members, and it's donation-based for civilian, right? And that's based on our business model as a nonprofit. But what I noticed that does is create this bubble, and the people who do come to it, they have a vested interest, the civilian side. They're not there for their own personal gain. They're there because they want to be in that community for whatever reason, right?
They want to support the vet.
Yeah, it's kind of an unconscious filter to create those safe spaces in our community classes, right? In our mission. In the teacher training, though, we have a vetting process. We make sure everybody is who they say they are, and we are selective in who we let in outside of the military community and make sure their intentions are pure. And when you're in that bubble, the walls come down, and it's something profound that no civilian does really see, unless they're like part of that training. And my civilian teachers on staff, right? They're amazing teachers. And somebody like Brittany, where she has an expectation, she's not a veteran, military, doesn't speak the language. And I'm like, hey, come in and lead this training. And the first day, she's like, she can't even speak because she sees how powerful and how vulnerable and safe they feel immediately. And she feels that responsibility and steps up, right? And same with any one of us as a leader in our community to create that safe space. And as a teacher, when you feel that vibration of vulnerability and those walls down, you will step up, right? Because your intention and your heart is pure.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, it is a big responsibility. But you create that safe space through your intention, through your training, your education. Put it out there. What demographic do you want to serve? Do you have personal experience? Cool. Study that. Make sure you can speak from that. If you don't, study it and think about your intention for wanting to reach that community and that demographic, and how do you create that safe space analytically, emotionally, physically. There's a lot of different ways to study that, but it all comes down to the intention and the purity of what you are trying to do and create to make that safe space.
One of the things that I love about what you do with Vetoga is that it's not purely asana focused, right? Of course, you have that physical component because you're working with very physical people, but you do a lot of work with yoga nidra, which I think is where I think personally, where the true deepest profound healing can come. So can you tell us more about yoga nidra and how you work with it in terms of your teacher training?
Sure. So my own personal journey, right? I dove into Dharma's practice, very asana focused, very spiritual, hatha. But our shavasana has that treat at the end. It is a little simple yoga nidra that Dharma has, yeah. And it's very, very pure and very short, right? It's nothing big or profound as far as looking at it and breaking it down. And when I first laid my first yoga nidra in Dharma's class, like that medicine and me feeling things melting away, I could do 100 asana classes or go hike a mountain and run and do all these other physical things. I just found a secret, right? And I dove in to studying with Amrit and doing these advanced yoga. My first yoga nidra teacher training was 2 weeks long over at a Mega Institute, right? Like my book, my book. This was my Georgetown book my yoga nidra book was this thick, right?
Right.
And my Dharma teacher manual was this, right, which was big. But yoga nidra, I quickly learned I needed to know what I'm doing here, right?
Yeah.
Educate myself. So I went out and studied with different teachers also, and embodied yoga nidra. I started administering it in my classes and seeing the effects, right? And it was from the pure intentions that the most feedback was, hey, I don't know what just happened, but I want more of it, right? And that's a common theme with these veterans. I don't know what that was, but I want more, right? And I knew that was going to be a part of Vetoga. It's a huge part. It's the secret sauce, like you said. It is the magic that happens in the asana. At the end, you have this yoga nidra. We're creating a curriculum for our yoga nidra program. We have the 15-hour Yoga Alliance continuing education, but we're going to have an 100-hour yoga or yoga nidra certification too in our school. Because it is such an important component of what we do. They are certified after our 200-hour as yoga nidra to administer. We have scripts that we trust with them to keep it simple as a 200-hour instructor, and then we ask of them when we mentor them when they go to their 300-hour other programs to see how they want to expand on that. A lot of our teachers have went out and done their own yoga nidra trainings with Richard Miller, with iRest, with Kamini Desai. That's Amrit's daughter. A couple other methods out there, and we all report back, and we have a committee, and we see the latest and greatest out there. We come back, we refine it, and say, how does this most speak to veterans, right? And the common theme is it's magical, as you know. Yoga nidra is pure medicine when it's administered through a pure vessel and heart.
It's designed to get into the deep psyche. It's designed to get into the unconscious, which is where all these triggers and traumas lie. And unless you do something that actually gets you into the unconscious, you can't really mine that darkness.
Like drugs or something?
As they say. What's that?
Some people with the plant medicine lately is another one. Some of our veterans are studying to get into the altered states, and they actually have some nonprofits they're starting around that. So interesting enough.
Very interesting. Okay, I love it. So how do people learn more about you, Justin? Where do they learn more about Vetoga? How can they learn from you or learn more about your teacher training?
Sure. So vetoga.org, VETOGA, so vetoga.org. On there, we have a tab for the teacher training, and you can go on there. You can look at the website, look around at our previous teacher trainings, the pictures, the teachers under active instructors. But the teacher training tab is where you go, and you can learn about our 200-hour program. We're currently rolling out our Vetoga.org 2.0 here in the next month or so. We are putting ourselves to a 1,000-hour curriculum in the future. So we have a 200-hour program we've done 4 times. We're doing another one this fall that people can sign up for in November, and then one in the spring. So those trainings are in the spring and the fall training every year. We completed our first 300-hour training this year. We have a advanced training in Ayurveda and post-traumatic growth, where we just had our graduates last month. So they have the 300-hour curriculum, and then we're going to have these smaller modules with yoga nidra, yoga for veterans, yoga for first responders, yoga for law enforcement, yoga for prisoners, and then a yoga therapy program that we're rolling out also. So that'll all be on the website once we get there.
I am so impressed, and I am so in awe and honor the work that you do to hyper educating your people about something that is so critically important. So thank you for all the work that you do, Justin.
Thank you, Alana.
Yeah. So everybody listening, obviously, we've learned a lot through our chat. I definitely want you to go check Justin out at vetoga.org. And if you know of any veterans or someone who can benefit from what Justin is doing, make sure that you point them his way. So thanks for chatting with us today, Justin. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Honored to be on here, Alana.